The following is a dramatized account of real events, presented for informative and entertainment purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised. In the glittering world of fame, power, and ambition, love doesn't always lead to happily ever after. Welcome to Drama Central, where real relationships unravel before your eyes. Tonight, on Drama Central, they built a billion-dollar company on secrets, promises, and blood tests smaller than a drop of rain. But beneath the lab coats and luxury offices, there was something far more dangerous than faulty tech. A hidden relationship that would become both a shield and a sword in one of Silicon Valley's biggest downfalls. This is the rise and fall of a couple whose love story was buried beneath scandal. A tale of control, obsession, deception, and a betrayal that echoed through federal courtrooms and the headlines of the world. This is the breakup of Elizabeth Holmes and Ramesh Balwani, the startup queen and the hacker. Elizabeth Ann Holmes was born in Washington, D.C. on February 3, 1984, into a family with political and business roots. Her father, Christian Holmes IV, worked for government agencies like USAID and Enron, while her mother, Noelle, was a congressional committee staffer. Elizabeth's ambition showed early. At just 9 years old, she wrote a letter to her father declaring she wanted to be a billionaire entrepreneur when she grew up. Her childhood was marked by a sense of purpose, even obsession. While other kids played games, Elizabeth devoured biographies of inventors, idolized Steve Jobs, and fixated on learning Mandarin. During high school, she took summer classes at Stanford University, and by the time she formally enrolled at Stanford in 2002, she was already plotting her legacy. Her charm was peculiar but effective. She spoke in a low, deliberate voice that some later suspected was manufactured. She dressed in all black turtlenecks and exuded an aura of mystery that impressed older, wealthier men in Silicon Valley. And one of those men would change her life forever: Ramesh Balwani. Sunny was 2 decades her senior. Born in Pakistan and raised partly in India before moving to the U.S., Balwani made his fortune in tech, most notably cashing out before the dot-com bubble burst in the early 2000s. By the time he met Holmes in 2002 during a Beijing immersion program, he was already a multi-millionaire. The connection between them was instant, intense even. She was just 18. He was 37. Sunny wasn't just rich, he was flashy. He had a taste for designer watches, expensive cars, and tech world status symbols. During the dot-com boom, he was known to show off personalized license plates and lived with the kind of confidence only early internet millionaires could afford. He wasn't classically handsome, but he exuded something that carried weight: power, swagger, and the thrill of a man who had already won one gamble in Silicon Valley. That aura would prove intoxicating. According to court records, their romantic relationship began not long after Holmes returned to Stanford. Within a year, she dropped out to launch a biotech startup, one that promised to revolutionize blood testing forever. Sunny was right there beside her, not as a co-founder, but as her secret weapon, her protector, and, for a time, her secret partner in more ways than one. In 2005, Sunny officially joined Theranos as president and COO, but their romantic relationship? Still hidden from investors, board members, and most employees. It wasn't just unprofessional, it was a strategic secret. Despite their efforts to keep up appearances at the office, Holmes and Balwani were living together behind closed doors. not in a modest apartment, but in a sprawling $9 million estate in Atherton, California. Tucked away in one of the wealthiest zip codes in the country, their home was surrounded by privacy hedges and security cameras. It was the kind of place that projected success, serenity, and absolute control, mirroring the carefully curated image Theranos presented to the outside world. Inside that house, their personal and professional lives blurred beyond recognition. But behind the gates of their $9 million mansion, things weren't always as composed as they seemed. Holmes had a Siberian husky named Balto, a dog she insisted was part wolf, despite DNA tests proving otherwise. She sometimes compared herself to Balto, the real-life sled dog hero who delivered medicine through a storm, casting herself as a misunderstood savior navigating chaos. She often brought the dog to the Theranos office, where he reportedly wasn't house-trained and would occasionally leave surprises on the floor during work hours. Some employees said she saw the dog as a symbol of resilience and believed his presence gave the company spiritual depth. She was said to smile at him and say things like, "He's our good luck charm." Some staff found it bizarre. Others saw it as a metaphor, a wild creature treated like royalty, immune to the rules everyone else had to follow. And it wasn't just the dog that was performing. Theranos's product demos were a masterclass in misdirection. During high-stakes investor visits, the Edison device was often preloaded with fabricated test results, creating the illusion that it had analyzed a drop of blood in real time. In truth, the samples were either tested in advance or secretly processed using commercial lab machines hidden in the back. While investors watched in awe, thinking they were witnessing a medical revolution, nothing was actually happening. It wasn't just a deceptive presentation. They were staging an illusion. Together, they shaped the company into a sleek, enigmatic empire. Elizabeth was the face, young, brilliant, female, a unicorn in the male-dominated world of biotech. Sunny was the enforcer, blunt, aggressive, and known for firing employees on the spot. While Holmes spun dreams, Balwani maintained control. But even in the early days, cracks were forming behind the scenes. Theranos's central promise, that a drop of blood could run hundreds of accurate tests on a compact device, was never fully realized. Employees who raised concerns were often met with hostility or terminated abruptly. According to multiple former staffers, the company became a place of fear and surveillance. And the Holmes-Balwani relationship, it fed into the paranoia. Some began calling the company cult-like. Employees weren't just discouraged from asking questions, they were told not to speak to coworkers in other departments. Dissent was punished. Balwani monitored emails and meetings like a watchdog, while Holmes was treated almost like a prophet, admired, feared, untouchable. The head of lab operations even said she was told not to correct Holmes in meetings, even when what she said was wildly incorrect. Behind the lab coats and lofty mission, Theranos felt more like a belief system than a business. Even quitting didn't break the spell. Former employees said they were shadowed by private investigators, served with blistering legal threats, and warned that speaking out would ruin their lives. Balwani himself allegedly fired off menacing late-night texts, accusing defectors of sneaking around like mice and vowing to unleash lawyers on anyone who dared whisper Theranos's secrets. NDAs weren't just paperwork here. They felt like handcuffs, and the company wore the key around its neck. Balwani's influence over Holmes was so pervasive that some employees began referring to him as a shadow CEO. In internal emails later exposed during litigation, Holmes often deferred to Sonny on major decisions, from clinical trials to investor pitches. Despite no formal scientific background, he had veto power over scientists and engineers. And still, the romance remained a secret. Behind closed doors, their relationship followed a chilling kind of blueprint. Balwani didn't just love Holmes. He structured her. He reportedly encouraged her to live by a strict daily regimen, shaping everything from her sleep cycle and food intake to how she walked, talked, and even when she had sex. She began dressing in identical outfits, speaking in a low, controlled tone, and adhering to rigid productivity rules. What some saw as eccentric genius looked, to those closer to the inner circle, like a woman being reprogrammed by the man who claimed to protect her. At the same time, Holmes was crafting a persona, one that blurred ambition with imitation. She idolized Steve Jobs so intensely that she didn't just dress like him in black turtlenecks. She reportedly adopted his fruitarian diet, at times subsisting on green juices and raw vegetables for days. Some insiders noticed her skipping meals or adhering to strange fasting patterns. Whether driven by Sonny's influence or her own desire for control, it became clear. Elizabeth Holmes wasn't just building a company. She was building a character, one that felt carefully engineered, almost theatrical in its restraint. In 2011, Theranos reached a valuation of nearly $1 billion. High-profile investors like Rupert Murdoch, the Walton family, and former Secretaries of State Henry Kissinger and George Shultz lined up to buy in. The media hailed Holmes as the next Steve Jobs, while Balwani stayed just out of frame. But as Theranos climbed higher, the lies had to stack taller. The company began demoing devices that didn't work. Tests were often run on third-party machines while claiming they came from the Theranos Edison. Patients received wildly inaccurate results, and behind the scenes, Holmes and Balwani were tightening the circle. According to former employees, Balwani monitored emails, installed security systems, and orchestrated the firing of anyone deemed a threat. Holmes defended him at every turn. The two operated like a unit, romantically, professionally, and legally indistinguishable. Some employees whispered about their connection, about private meetings that stretched too long and glances that lingered. Nothing was ever confirmed, but in a company obsessed with secrecy, the mystery only fed the myth. They weren't just in control of Theranos, they were in control of the narrative. Yet even the most fortified castles can't withstand the truth. In 2015, the Wall Street Journal published a bombshell exposé by journalist John Carreyrou. It revealed what insiders had whispered for years. Theranos wasn't delivering on its promises. Tests were unreliable. Data was manipulated. The machines were malfunctioning. And just like that, the empire began to crumble. With regulators circling and whistleblowers speaking out, the once glowing facade of Theranos began to peel. And so did the mask of the relationship behind it. In 2016, Holmes and Balwani quietly ended their romantic partnership. The breakup wasn't publicized, but its timing was impossible to ignore, just as the federal government began its investigation into fraud. Holmes remained CEO. Balwani resigned. Publicly, the company framed it as a routine leadership change. Privately, insiders said the breakup was far from clean. The emotional undertow of a years-long, tightly wound relationship had snapped. And when it snapped, it didn't just break hearts. It opened the door to federal indictments. In 2018, Holmes and Balwani were both charged with multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy. The Department of Justice claimed they knowingly misled investors, doctors, and patients about the capabilities of Theranos' technology. Here's where the story takes its darkest turn. As the court proceedings loomed, Holmes's legal strategy shifted. In 2021, she alleged that Sunny Balwani had emotionally and psychologically abused her during their relationship, accusations he forcefully denied. According to her defense, Balwani exerted intense control over her business decisions, her personal life, even her meals and sleep patterns. Court documents described a household governed by manipulation and dominance. Holmes claimed Balwani would get very angry with her, monitoring her every move and punishing deviations. He allegedly dictated her speaking style, her clothing, her tone in meetings. The courtroom became a battleground not just of legal guilt, but of personal trauma. Balwani's legal team rejected the abuse claims as a fabrication. They painted Holmes as the true architect of the fraud, arguing that Sunny was misled just like everyone else, or at worst, complicit but not controlling. The public, once captivated by the blonde tech prodigy in a turtleneck, now watched in fascination and disbelief as the once unshakable power couple turned against each other. The trial of Elizabeth Holmes began in September 2021 and ran for over 3 months. In January 2022, she was convicted on 4 counts of fraud and conspiracy. Balwani's trial followed later that year. In December 2022, he was convicted on all 12 counts. They were sentenced separately. Holmes to over 11 years in prison, Balwani to nearly 13. From lovers to co-conspirators to bitter courtroom opponents, their fall was complete. But even after their convictions, their names remain entwined in the public imagination. The media couldn't help but ask, was it love that drove the lies, or lies that disguised as love? The answer, like so much of the Theranos mythos, remains murky. Today, Elizabeth Holmes is serving her sentence at a minimum security prison in Texas. She reported in May 2023, shortly after giving birth to her second child. Her public image has shifted from that of a tech visionary to a cautionary tale, though some still see her as a victim of a system that devours young female ambition. Sunny Balwani, meanwhile, began his sentence in Southern California in March 2023. Once fiercely private, he has remained largely silent since his conviction. The Theranos saga is now a staple in business ethics courses, documentaries, and dramatic retellings. But behind the boardroom drama and biotech failure lies the human story, one of intimacy, secrecy, and emotional corrosion. Their relationship was forged in the fires of ambition and secrecy, but it ended in the cold light of federal prosecution. What began as a powerful connection between mentor and protege became something darker, something harder to define. Love? Obsession? Codependence? Or simply two people so deeply entangled in their own delusion that they mistook deception for devotion? Whatever it was, the world will never see them the same way again. They dreamed of changing the world. Instead, they changed each other, irrevocably. Thanks for watching Drama Central. If you enjoyed this unraveling of a real-life romantic fallout, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because in the world of drama, we're just getting started.